So let's get started. Today, July 14th, 2021. I'm date stamping the video as I'm starting to record these. Some have asked me to record them just because sometimes they can't make it for whatever reason. Hopefully that's not the reason why we have a small group today. But I do expect others to start logging in later as they usually do. But I do want to get started closer to the time to kind of teach those to log in early for the live sessions. This particular presentation came about because I was finding some of the agents that I was working with, and some of you may have remembered what we talked about in the farming session or farming presentation, that you want to try and narrow down the area that you're farming, because you want to be able to frequent. And so some of them were asking me, well, how do we do that, right? So this is how I came up with this one, target prospects, mainly because you can target an area, target demographic, target a type of property. There's certain types of things that we'll go over today that we'll talk about on how to target certain things and how to get that information. Okay, so let's get started with the precursors, if you will. So there's my information. You guys have that. There's me, my little avatar you used for my show. Anybody who gets my emails, I include a link to the real estate rant. Right now, it's currently showing shows that were done in 2013. So that was quite some time ago. It feels like it was just yesterday, but it definitely was back that far, because I dated I have a show chart that I use with all the links. And that particular show was done in September 2013 with Dr. Coy, which turned out to be a good show. I like rewatching them. It reminds me of certain things. A lot of things that we talked about then apply now. There are a lot of new stuff too, and that's what we try to cover now, to try and stay abreast of all the things that are going on right now in real estate. I do ask you guys to mute on your side, although I do mute on my side, but sometimes you guys will unmute to chime in with a comment or question. Feel free to do so anytime. But I do mute you on my side. It gives me that ability. Zoom gives me that ability. That way, we're not hearing the background noise. Sometimes there's dogs, babies, trucks driving by, that kind of thing. Creates somewhat of a distraction. So, but I will say again, feel free to chime in anytime, okay? You can also chime in the chat room. I try to get to the chat room questions at the end of each slide. And also you can ask questions there as well, okay? And thank you guys for logging in early. I know there's going to be some other folks logging in probably a little bit later, as they usually do. And that's just because I like to get started, because I don't want to go too late into the evening. There have been some presentations that have gone as late as 8:30, and I certainly don't want to do that. And I've deliberately tried to keep these presentations down to anywhere between 17 and 20 slides. This particular one happens to be 17, so it should go pretty quick. The last month or so, we've gotten done before, I want to say 7:20. So that's been pretty good. So whereas, this whole training isn't too intrusive on your week. You're spending an hour and a half possibly doing the training, as opposed to when we used to do the live trainings, you used to have to drive to a location, and then it adds possibly an additional hour to the training. So instead of it being an hour and a half, you're spending 2 hours and a half or more, just because there's some socializing, possible let's go out for a sandwich or something afterwards. So it's kind of nice, the whole Zoom thing that came about. And as always, feel free to anybody that could benefit from the trainings, anybody that's interested in getting into the real estate industry, feel free to email me or call me to get put on the registration. Hopefully all you guys are getting my emails and text messages. If you're not, just send me an email with your phone number and or email address, and I'll make sure that you're on the list, okay? Any questions or comments? I'm assuming you guys can hear me okay, because one time I started and my mic was muted and I didn't even know. I'm sitting here talking to myself, right? But I'm assuming you guys can hear me. So whereas nobody's saying anything, so I guess no news is good news. Okay, thank you, Robert. So I appreciate that. So let's get started here. Okay, so target marketing involves breaking a market into segments and then concentrating your marketing efforts on one or a few key segments consisting of the customers whose needs and desires most closely match your product or service offerings. Now, remember that some of the research that I do on some of these presentations involves other industries. So you'll kind of see that kind of flow over, but there is an overlap to our industry. So it kind of has the same meaning, okay? It can be the key to attracting new business, increasing your sales, and making your business a success. The beauty of target marketing is that by aiming your marketing efforts at specific groups of consumers, it makes the promotion, pricing, and distribution of your products and or service easier and more cost effective. And that's where I think that's where it's kind of important for us as agents. When we talk about cost effectiveness, that's important because a lot of us don't like to spend money on marketing, and much less do we like to spend time on marketing. So if we try to focus on these concepts, I think it will help save on the cost and slash the effectiveness of your marketing. So in real estate, it would simply be your brand. Okay, so we all try to brand ourselves. Some of us don't. Okay, but you do see some agents out there that brand themselves. You see that there's a gentleman. He put the dog rider on top of his signs, and so you recognize it right away, right? So that individual is interested in branding himself that way. And ultimately, it helps people recognize who he is. You see his signs in a bunch of different places, you pretty much know who he is. Any questions or comments on that? So I use the word segment, okay, because I know what that means, but some of you may not exactly know what it means. So here's a little bit more of a definition, right? Each of the parts in which something is or may be divided, okay? And in real estate, that's kind of easy, right? So a market segment can be viewed three ways, right? Geographically, it is easy to visualize a geographic location on a map. One can divide or segment an area easily by using neighborhoods, area codes, streets, city lines, state lines, or even zip codes, which are recognized as segments or parts of a market area. So when we're talking about geographically, you can actually visualize it best if you're looking at a map of the United States. Each state is a segment of the country. So that is simply an example of what I'm talking about. Obviously, we're going to be working with the much smaller segments, but I'm trying to illustrate what a segment means. Okay, so if we're talking about a segment, visualize a map of the United States. Each state is a segment of the country. Okay, demographically, which delineates the structure of population. One can divide and group gender, age, income levels, marital status, education, race, religion, and even homeownership as factors in the segment. Now, I know right now the political climate talks about, discrimination and that kind of thing. But that's not what this is talking about. Simply targeting a market. So let me give you an example. There are agents that target the older community, and for the most part, there are a lot of folks that go into assisted living. So a lot of those folks, they need to get either sell their home or do something with it, right? So some agents target some of the older folks, right? So that's not discrimination, right? You're actually simply just segmenting your market. Okay, so demographically speaking, that could be a situation. Okay, or that could be a potential marketing tactic. Okay, so that's simply an example of demographics, right? So demographic segmentation is usually the most important criteria for identifying target markets. Marketing knowledge of demographic information crucial for many businesses. And so a lot of times this is subliminal. We're not really thinking about it so much, but it's there. And believe it or not, you almost are kind of thinking about it. You just don't realize it. Okay. And it's because we are simply just a products of our environment. So whatever our environment happens to be, let's say you're like Uptown Whittier, it's a college town. And if you go into some of the businesses, you see a lot of younger people. So subliminally, you are kind of actively understanding and knowing that market segment, but you're just not thinking about it. So that's just something to think about in terms of who you might want to market in an area if you happen to be, if that happens to be your target market. Okay. Any questions or comments on that? All right. Let's keep moving here. So psychographic segmentation. So psychographic segmentation divides the target market based on socioeconomic class, personality, or lifestyle preferences. The socioeconomic scale ranges from the affluent and highly educated at the top of the uneducated and unskilled at the bottom. The UK-based National Readership Survey defines social class according to the following categories. So I thought this was kind of important because again, it's almost subliminal. Like I kind of look at this kind of like everyone kind of has a little number on their forehead, right? In terms of what category you fall under. We don't put people in those categories necessarily, but subliminally we do. And maybe that's not even the right word, but this is a study that was done. Or actually it's a survey that was done. And this is how it breaks it down, right? So some of us might think of the folks that live, let's say in Beverly Hills, right? Just to make an example, to be, to have the social grade under this survey of the upper middle class, right? And then so on and so forth. You can kind of almost pick an area and say, oh yeah, the middle class, that's kind of downy, right? Lower middle class, South Whittier, right? Skilled working class. You might talk about Vernon, right? So see how I'm segmenting the different areas based on maybe the income level. Doesn't really have anything to do with the race necessarily, but for the most part, there's such a thing. So you just have to decide who you want to market to. So it really has less to do with discriminating against these groups and more to do with actually including them in your marketing plan, right? And who you want to market to. You might even actually relate to some of these groups better than others, right? So psychographic segmentation is based on the theory that the choices that people make when purchasing goods or services are reflections of their lifestyle preferences or socioeconomic class. And so, if you're gonna, so let's say you're gonna market in Marina Del Rey, you probably have the majority of people out there that have boats, right? And or like sailing. So it doesn't necessarily have to do so much with their sociographic segmentation, but they are a little bit more affluent, and that may be maybe a hobby of yours, right? So you have some relation to that. So that could be a possible choice in who you're going to market to. So any questions or comments on that? So far we have geographic, demographic, sociographic, right? Gets a little confusing, but I can visualize it. I hope you guys are catching on. So here's a little case study. Okay, this is something that I had on my show. I thought it was worthwhile putting it on here because McDonald's just happens to be one of the largest real estate ventures in the world. So McDonald's restaurants are the largest fast food chain in the world and one of the most successful examples of demographic target marketing, aiming their products at children, teenagers, and young urban dwelling families by offering play places, free Wi-Fi, happy meals that include toys such as Walt Disney characters, and ad campaigns with slogans such as "Feed Your Inner Child." Targeted advertising combined with aggressive pricing has enabled McDonald's to capture 25% of the fast food market share in the US, which is pretty impressive. However, in recent years, as millennials have surpassed baby boomers to become the largest generation in the US, McDonald's sales have been in decline as fast food style menu items such as the ubiquitous Big Mac and the fries have lesser appeal to millennials. In response, McDonald's has altered their marketing strategy to target the millennial generation by advertising fresher, healthier menu options and upscale coffee products such as espressos, and sorry, somebody's logging in here, and spinach egg whites with turkey breakfast bowls. And I don't think I've ever seen that on the menu, but I've ordered it before, and that's just because sometimes for breakfast I try to eat healthy. Even though I'm guilty of ordering the number two or even the number eight, the two egg McMuffin, sausage McMuffin with eggs. But for the most part, I wanted to show this as an example of what I'm talking about in terms of target marketing. Okay, McDonald's simply targeted a demographic, right? They targeted younger folks, and they still do. I remember when I was a kid, they had the Ronald McDonald and the Hamburglar, and there was a couple other characters. I don't even remember who they were, but there was like 3 or 4 of them characters that they were appealing to kids, and kids simply they saw the sign and said, "Oh, I want to go to McDonald's." Man, I still see that today. I've seen little kids, they see McDonald's and they go crazy, and that's because it's not just the food. The food is to me maybe B- rated in terms of food. Some a little better than others, but yeah, some of their coffee products and they have smoothies and stuff like that. They're really good. So I would say that they're probably more B+, A- rated in terms of in the beverage world, right? But I thought this was a good example because they do have 25% of the market share, and that seems to be the reason why is because they're target marketing. So that would be an example of kind of what we're talking about demographically, right? Any questions or comments on that? All right, so let's move right along. So market research is the collection and analysis of information about customers, competitors, and the effectiveness of marketing programs. While market research is crucial for business startup, it's also essential for established businesses to increase profits. It's accurate information about the marketplace, the target market, customers, and the competition that allows the development of a successful marketing plan. How do businesses use market research? Business owners use market research to determine the feasibility of a new business. Market research is an essential component of a business plan for startup businesses. If market research does not indicate a demand for the product or service, the proposed business will not likely be viable. So if you're doing a little research and it just seems like, you know what, this ain't going to work. Let me give you an example. Let's say that you have to do like 12 sales in order to survive, right? But you're in a rural area and there's only, maybe 3,000 homes in a rural area over, like, say, a 10 to 15 mile radius. You're probably not going to make those 12 sales because there are other agents in that area, and there's not a lot of sales. So that would be an example of that kind of research, right? That it would be it would be likely that the business would not be viable. That's the the determination there, right? So back to business owners use market research to test interest in new products or services to respond to customer needs. Some of the things that we use in real estate, this kind of applies to loan products. There seems to be, you know, a creative nature about loan products. You know, there's adjustable rate mortgages, there's you know, 12-month ARMs, there is you know, hard money, there's even hero programs. You know, when it comes to financing, there seems to be like an innovative nature, and this kind of like what seems to be sometimes a real estate agent's a way of marketing is to talk about the financing, which I think is a strong point. Find and develop new markets. So here in Whittier, the Fred C. Nels facility got torn down, and they started building condos in there, right? And some of the agents in this office have been selling them. So they just simply got involved in the new construction. They got involved in what was going on there. And maybe it wasn't part of their original marketing plan, but they found a new market. And that's an example of that. Monitor industry and economic trends and develop strategies to adapt the business to the changing environment. So again, that might also entail lending. Lending seems to be cyclical, and mainly because the interest rate fluctuates. And there has to be things that you have to create sometimes, and you have to adapt to those things. You know, when the market when the interest rate goes up, a lot of times the market slows down, and we have to adapt into other areas of real estate, maybe that we're not comfortable in right away, right? But monitoring the industry usually means you're watching the interest rate. And if you go on Google and you just type in prime rate, it'll come up, the prime rate for that day, and it usually fluctuates I think 3 to 5 times a day. So that is something that you potentially will have to adapt to, because if you're strong in one area, that area might, you know, fall in or increase, I'm sorry, or decrease in popularity, so you'll have to add some new ones, right? Determine optimal product placement. When, where, and how should a product or service be distributed? And again, I took this off of a marketing platform, but we kind of have to be imaginative here. Primarily, you see a lot of A-frame signs go up all over the city. And a lot of times, you know, I've heard complaints from agents, you know, at a lot of the broker previews and what have you. Then they say, you know, they see signs up, but there's no open house. Well, what I ask them is, well, did the sign say open house? And that's because some of the agents have gotten a little tricky, and they've just put up signs just so people can see their sign. It has nothing to, and a writer. It has nothing to do with an open house. And so, you know, the feedback was, oh yeah, no, there's no open house sign. It's just a sign. Well, then all they're doing is advertising. Nothing wrong with that. The problem is that the city requires you to take those A-frame signs down at nighttime. You can't keep them up overnight. And that seemingly is a problem for some folks, especially if they're putting up, you know, 30, 40 signs. You know, they got to go pick them up before day's up. You know, there's a possibility of getting a fine and that kind of thing from the city, but I think we're going to do it a lot, right? I don't know that they would freak out if they see it once or twice. But that could be a determination, right, of your advertising. And then obviously the area as well. Improve aspects of their business, such as customer service. What we're doing right now, and what we've been doing pretty much all year, is coming on to these trainings and trying to improve our service, mainly just with product knowledge, right? We're learning the contracts, we're learning the disclosures, we're learning concepts. I'm constantly giving you guys little nuggets of things, uh, industry tricks, if you will, tricks of the trade that help you improve your service. And one of the things that I talk about often is that you have to keep your cool, because it's so easy to get upset at other agents because of how they behave. We had a situation today where the agent literally lied about an escrow fee to try and negotiate it down, and we caught him in the lie. And how easy is it for us to pick up the phone and cuss this guy out? And I simply suggest that you keep your cool and keep your professionalism, because something like that can come back to bite you. So improve aspects of your business, and such as customer service. So that is just simply part of customer service. Just because they happen to be our comrades and colleagues really doesn't give us the right to yell and scream at them, even though they're behaving either ill-mannered or what's the word, immoral. maybe not even immoral. They're just unethically acting in their business. And so it's just something that we want to keep our cool, to keep our professionalism, and actually improve our business through service. Develop competitive strategies. For example, setting competitive pricing for products or services, or determining how your product, services, and customer service compare to the competition. So we've all seen, the signs that gone up, full service package for a set fee, right? That seems to be something that's kind of floating around. I've seen other things like guarantees, that if we don't sell your house, we'll buy it. I've seen that. I've seen other gimmicks like that, or strategies. But these are things to consider, where, somebody, you just ask yourself, would I do that? Would I do this same thing for a little less money? Sometimes the answer is yes. And then in other areas, you might say, hey, can I raise the price on this? And sometimes the answer is yes. So these are just things that you have to kind of massage into place to be competitive in your business, right? Excuse me. Develop optimal strategies for promotion, how to get the message out to the target market via branding, traditional advertising, or social media. So there are different types of marketing. There's something called blanket marketing, where you're not really targeting anybody. You're just throwing it out there to everybody, right? Blanket marketing. Target marketing is a little bit more precise. And we've been talking about that in previous slides. But in terms of how you're marketing or what you're marketing, see, like me, I like to use my avatar. That just happens to be my brand, right? My little cartoon, I get a lot of comments on it, never anything negative. And kids seem to like it when they see it. And it's, that's just my playful nature, if you will. That just happens to be mine, for an example. But a lot of us are on social media, any advertising that we're doing on business cards or signs, you simply just have to try to get the message out. What it is that you do specifically, right? It helps to understand the advertising if you're being specific, okay? In our case, you could be specific in a few areas. You're a listing agent, you're a buyer's agent, or selling agent. You do property management. There could be very specific things you can talk about there. So any questions or comments on that? So now, again, I did this research on target marketing. So some of it overlapped a bit to other industries. So forgive the what's the word? You'll see what I'm talking about as I'm reading it. But it's a bit, it's not real estate specific, in other words, okay? But I hope you guys can understand what it is that we're trying to say, and I'll try to explain as we go. Okay. So product trials or usability studies. So provide samples of new products to consumers or customers in a live setting, engaging responses. Direct customer feedback can be used to make changes to the product as required or determine optimal pricing. So, that's kind of true when we list a property. A lot of times we've got to change the price. A lot of times there may be some comments that we may have to change because we missed it, or maybe there was something that we simply just omitted, right? So that is something that we simply gauge pretty much on a daily basis. So focus groups probably doesn't really apply to us too much, but you can look at a focus group as your previous clients, right? So these are organized sessions with groups of people where a scripted topic of question and answer discussion with a moderator takes place. Focus groups can collect very useful information, but are a difficult to organize and expensive method of marketing research for small businesses. Focus groups are increasingly conducted online. So with focus groups, what I found, okay, I kind of relate this to networking. When you go to a networking event, you're actually meeting up with a lot of people. And that's kind of what this is talking about. So you're not necessarily gathering those people or really have a choice. But what I have found is that I'll start asking questions about certain things that I potentially could be asking in a focus group. And I'm getting feedback. That is how I related this particular topic to what we do, okay? So think about what you might ask in a group setting, and over a beer or maybe a cup of coffee, right? You're not necessarily just talking to one person, but you're getting feedback. And a lot of times it's honest feedback because you're in a social setting. There's no pressure to be cordial or what's the word? I was going to say, I can't think of the word, but when you go to Thanksgiving dinner, you're eating all proper and everything, right? You feel like you have to eat properly. Well, in a social setting, that's not necessarily the case. I think etiquette is the word I was looking for. Direct observation. This involves watching or video recording customers in a natural setting to see how they respond to displays of products or services. Direct observation has advantages in that the purposes of collecting information, the customer is behaving naturally rather than possibly responding in a contrived fashion as they might with another form of survey. But it is a very time-consuming method of market research. Now, I related this topic to open houses. Open houses, a lot of people make gestures. I actually still to this day talk about some gestures that my sister made when I was showing her houses, and we laugh about it whenever we go out to dinner. And sometimes we remind her of how she acted at this particular house. It was pretty funny, some of the gestures she was making and some of the things. This is all good information, especially if it's your listing. Sometimes these things are curable because sometimes it has to do with maybe some furniture, or maybe the smell, or possibly an animal that happens to be in the house. These are all things that are curable, right? So we have these different variables, if you will, that you can study, but the idea is to pay attention. A lot of times, I was talking about this earlier about things being kind of subliminal, but if we're paying attention, right, simply observing the potential client or observing other people's reactions and asking questions, you're getting an idea of what's important. And that's really the idea behind these different variables is to gather knowledge and use it to your advantage in terms of your marketing and in terms of your behavior, really. So any questions or comments on that? All right, so let's do class funny. So, but the customer said they would call right back. Oh yeah, right. Have many of those. I'm the only one around here that actually enjoys closing deals. Yeah, so these are some funnies that I picked up over the years that I thought were pretty funny, kind of related to what we're talking about. Um, maybe we didn't pick up on the gestures that I was talking about earlier. So when somebody says, "Oh yeah, we'll call you back," and they never do, um, I think one of the things that we talk about a lot is one of the things. And here's a little nugget for those of you who like the nuggets. Um, is that you never allow a customer to tell you that they'll call you back. Okay, you always set the appointment. Set an appointment, right? Make that part of your conversation. Um, you're in a conversation. Do you want? Oh yeah, I'll call you back. Say, hey, you know what? Can I call you back tomorrow at this time? It's very difficult for somebody to say no to that. And the John Goodman one here, the reason why this one caught my eye was because I have come across some agents that, they just don't have that killer mentality of wanting to close a deal. They get a deal, maybe in escrow, what have you, and then they forget to make phone calls, they forget to set appointments, they forget about the time frames. Maybe they don't do an extension of time, they don't write their addendums. They just don't, they're not interested in closing it. I'm here to say that if you get a deal in escrow, do everything as fast as you possibly can and just get it done. Believe me, it's a little bit more relaxing, because once you have everything done and you have reviewed your your email queue and your to-do list and everything's pretty much checked off, you can relax. But don't take it too lightly when you do have a transaction. And that's why these two funnies caught my eye. So let's see, we're on slide 10, 639. Seems like we're doing pretty good on time. So making it work, right? So before, we have talked about farming an area and how it is important to relate to a size in which you can effectively farm. Choosing a target is exactly that. Right? The rule of thumb is to target a market area large enough to be able to visit with a significant level of frequency, but not too large that you will not visit for long periods of time. So that's important because you don't want to visit every day, okay, to the same people. Obviously, that's too small of a market. And you don't want to visit twice a year. That's too large of a market. You might want to visit once, maybe twice a month. And if you find yourself in a market or an area to where that's happening, that's probably a pretty good size segment, that kind of like what we talked about. Using the methods previously discussed, as in geographic, demographic, and psychographic, one can effectively choose and engage an area to appropriately meet their needs. Experts will tell you, don't make the mistake of marketing your product or service before you've defined your customer or client. If you do, you're just throwing your marketing money away. Marketing isn't just a matter of placing ads. It is a method of attracting new business. So understand the difference there. We're not just placing ads, right? We're trying to attract people to the business. The ads are circumstantial. And you can, the good thing about ads is that you can change them around, find out what works, right? Agents do that all the time. If you see a lot of the ads that the agents put up, you'll see an ad there for 3 or 4 months and all of a sudden it changes. Maybe they're not finding it effective enough. They want to make it better. Or maybe they just want to change. It's just their style. Any questions or comments on that? All right. So let's go to resources. So one can find secondary data and collect it from phone directories, government publications, U.S. Department of Commerce, statistical publications, trade journals, internet information companies. Well, you can purchase from those companies, right? Primary sources provide first-hand information when you survey your customers or question competition. You're gathering information directly from the source. While this kind of market research data can be costly and time-consuming to gather, it can also be the most valuable because it's the most recent and the most specific. Now, one of the things that I didn't mention here, and this is something that I'm not a fan of, but some of you might be, is the brokerages that have large internet services. And I'll just mention one of them: Zillow, Redfin, Trillia, Homes.com. You have these brokerages that have these websites that have been cleverly put together as IDX feeds, meaning that you can search for property on them. And the reason why you can search for property on them is because they've been linked to MLS or other databases. So what agents are doing is they're getting the information, they're getting the listings, they're inputting it in MLS. Well, they give permission to these brokerages and or websites to take the information, put it on their website, and then sell it back to the agent. And the way they sell it back is they want you to pay them to put your information on their website. So this is why I'm not a big fan of it, but as a matter of mention, this is a way to gather potential clients, right? What I'm mentioning here is more of a traditional method of gathering clients or gathering information on the demographics that we talked about, or the psychographic, right? Or even geographic. So these are different publications, if you will, of that information. So some of you may want to take a picture of that, but again, I'm recording it, so when I put it up on my YouTube channel, it will be there for anybody to see. Any questions or comments on that? So visualize your market research as a grid. The market research grid shows the 2 types of data and the 3 areas of research. This will allow you to focus and segment your market efforts. Look at the grid. Information gathered about the data can help you determine what works. So you have secondary and primary, right? So you have collected by someone else, firsthand information. So this is information that you can purchase, right? This is an example. Buyers and sellers. You can purchase that information, right? Competition, which can also be clients or customers. Sales records, interview with brokers, right? And examples of those could be attorneys or paralegals, right? Or other agents. So these are examples of potential competition, but also potential business. And when we're talking to other agents, here's another little nugget. I usually tell some of the guys that ask me about this, hey Alex, you know what? How do you get this wholesale business going, right? And I tell them, well, anytime I'm sitting with somebody that potentially has buyers, I always tell them that I have properties for sale. And anytime I'm sitting with somebody that says they have properties for sale, I always tell them to have buyers. Now, I may not necessarily, so it's a little white lie, okay? But now it becomes my job, if I know that this person, let's say, has buyers, I simply just want to know what they want. So now I'm going to try and go get it. Because what happens, see, is you're doing something that somebody else isn't, and that's what's making you successful. So let that sink in for a second. You're doing something that somebody else isn't, and that's what's making you successful, and that's because you're acting on it. See, they're talking about it, you're acting on it. But in order for you to act on it, you have to have that information. So what happens is that things start falling on your lap, both buyers and sellers, because you're telling the buyers, oh yeah, I got properties for sale, and then you're telling the sellers, oh yeah, I got buyers. So guess what? They both end up in my lap. So that's a little nugget that we just have to be willing to talk about it. That's all that is just communication. I found that out probably, well, maybe 15 years into my career, uh, just watching other guys, talk. And I'm sitting there going, wait a minute, you don't have any buyers, dude. What are you talking about? I just didn't say anything, but then I realized what they were doing. And you know what? It works. It works. So environment. So the internet and local lenders, right? So here's an example, low inventory and rising interest rates. So we talked about the fluctuation, right, of the market. It's always cyclical, right? Cyclical meaning up and down, up and down. It's just simply a matter of riding the wave. During the slow times, there's activity. You just have to get in between it. During the busy times, there's activity. Obviously, the same thing. You just have to get in between it. So if it's slow or if it's busy, doesn't matter. You just have to get in between it, right? So any questions or comments on that? Good nuggets today, I think. So here's a visual of what we just talked about. Okay, this is from previous slides. Okay, study an area, right? Choose your geographic, demographic area, sometimes determined by price, and that's true. I mean, I think that it's one of those things where we're kind of subliminally, again, choosing different areas in terms of price. Like some of us might be intimidated by going into the $1 million areas, like maybe Bradbury or Beverly Hills, some of the beach areas, Newport Beach. We're intimidated by that. Maybe that's an intimidation factor, right? But that's going to help us choose an area, obviously. Okay, and then the size of the area. Be sure once you have decided what area you will market, not to make it too big. Again, it's about frequency, how often we're going to choose that area. Or I'm sorry, how often we're going to visit. And one of the things I do, and I haven't talked about it too much in this presentation, but when I used to drive into work, because work is roughly about 20 minutes if I were to drive just to and from home, okay, is that I would stop at 2 or 3 businesses, and a lot of times they were next door to each other, but I would stop and I would just say hi, right? Hey, what are you guys doing? How you guys doing? Here's my business card. Sometimes I would show up with donuts, and I could get the smaller little packs of donuts. So if I'm going to drop off, say a dozen donuts, but I'm going to separate it into 3 different boxes, right? It's the smaller boxes. So I'm giving one to each business that I'm visiting, right? And guess what? I'm putting my business card all over these boxes, and man, it used to be a hit. And I would be hitting different boxes. Well, guess what? Doing that for a year, I would start to know some of these people. We would stop and talk, and sometimes they would have questions. Sometimes I would have questions for them, and I would purposely do that. I may not be interested in their business, because one of them that I used to frequent was one of those places that have jobs, right? And I have no interest in that, but I was curious, like how do you guys get jobs? Even though that's not why I was there. But man, when I show up with donuts, they would light up. And believe me when I say that there is going to be some leads that come out of that, because again, you're acting on something that other agents are not. So what is that you're doing? You're doing something that they're not, and that's what's making you successful. You're acting on it. So that kind of goes into the size of the area, because obviously you're not going to drive to Santa Monica and do that very frequently, unless you live out there, of course. But the example is you're not going to drive an hour, because you're not going to visit very frequently. You want to be able to visit these people once or twice a month, right? And then data collection. So data from the area can be collected from outside sources along with first-hand contacts. So not only are you looking up the area in terms of, you might be comping it out, you have an idea of what the median price range is, you have an idea of, the schools in the area, you have an idea of, the different types of construction. Some of the areas that you go into, like most of the houses are 2-story houses, where other areas you drive into, they're 1-stories, right? So these are just little things that you start to find out as you're visiting certain areas, but you might like one over the other. Again, you're targeting a market, right? Market the area. So market tactics are discussed in depth in other classes to include door knocking, social media, email blasts, etc. And we talked about that a lot in the farming presentation. So if you look at this visual, right, this is kind of what we talked about this presentation. Study the area, right? Pick your market segment or the size of the area, collect your data, and then do it. Market the area, right? And let's see what I wrote here. I forgot I had a little thing there. The visual illustrated here along with the goals component requires a written plan. When choosing an area, deciding its size, beginning to collect data, both secondary and primary, and setting goals in the area, it is proven effective in creating and closing real estate transactions. So I know that when I originally, and some of you, I think most of you were here when I first started, right? That I talked about why I created this originally. And it's because I found that some agents were just kind of spot marketing. They were just kind of picking little areas, maybe doing a door knocking in this area, and they wouldn't do it again. They would go to another area, maybe they get a listing, and that all of a sudden now they're marketing that area. Just kind of spot marketing, okay? Not going to really get very far with that, mainly because you disappear over time. And really, what we talked about is the key to real estate is consistency. Consistency. You know, repeat that word every day because you got to be consistent. If you pick whatever it is you're going to do, and don't let me tell you what it is, okay? It can be whatever you want. Consistency is the key. And so now all of this here is simply just getting you to that point, because the consistency part comes on the last one in marketing the area. So in short, it becomes a full-time job. And I think I talk about that a little bit more in another slide here. So here's an example of a little bit of what I talked about, okay, of people that you can visit. All right, so you can visit buyers, and you know, buyers are everywhere, right? That's kind of a blanket statement. Attorneys, sellers, obviously those are the homes themselves. Attorneys, that's a good one, because attorneys a lot of times need real estate agents. For sale by owners, we actually had a whole class on that, right? Successor trustees. If you're talking to trust attorneys, a lot of times they need real estate agents. Executors, probates, document preparers, that's paralegals, right? Banks sometimes need real estate agents. Get to know the people at the bank, different folks that work there and what they do. Assisted living facilities, another good one. I actually have personally closed some transactions with assisted living individuals. Event organizers. Mr. Laird, did you want to chime in?
Yeah, they're good venues to get in, to study with terminology.
I'm sorry, Larry.
Things they aren't going to deal with you down the road.
I'm sorry, Larry, you cut out a bit. What was that? You know, Larry, I think you might have a bad connection. I'm losing you.
Okay, I got it.
Okay, right on. So anyway, assisted living event organizers. These are folks that do, you know, they have the halls, and a lot of times, you know, there's people getting married. Sometimes there's funerals. So, you know, they may need a real estate agent. Unfortunately, sometimes. Account managers, we're talking about REO companies, right? First responders, you know, the first responders And sometimes a lot of the medical folks, they have certain financing that's good to them, right? So here's some more. We've got organizations. We have like sports clubs, sports organizations, medical industry, cemeteries, schools, courthouses, PUDs or HOAs, new housing projects, the cities themselves, like City Hall. And I mentioned document preparers, pretty much the same as paralegals, but the list goes on. And I think Larry was trying to mention another one, but I think we got a bad connection there. Sorry about that, Larry. But I just wanted to give some examples. Everything we just talked about right now, okay? You know, I'm not suggesting that you market to all of these people, but the thing is that if you start on just this list, this is a full-time job. You know, just going and talking, here's my business card, here's some donuts. I've even seen the agents take little bags of candy, you know. You find out what kind of candy they like, right? And you get to know these people. And guess what? Hey, you know what? My sister's gonna buy a house, or my uncle's gonna buy a house. Can you help them out? That's what you're looking for. That's what you want. You get 12 to 15 of those a year, you'd be pretty busy. And if you look at everything that I just put up here, this is just a segment of the market. And I'm talking about a small segment of the market. There's so much more out there. But the trick is to get out there, right? It's to do it, right? So, okay, we're on slide number 15. So we're on final thoughts. Any questions or comments on that last slide? So good stuff. You know, that again, that's why I put it together, because I would get a lot of questions, because I would find agents at times where they just didn't have anything to do. I'm like, you're kidding me, dude. There's so much to do. I can't even tell you. And that's probably the reason why you're only closing 2 deals a year, right? You got to get out there and you got to talk to people. You got to talk. So part of putting a marketing plan together is to understand that it is difficult to market a large area, as the resources and energy will exhaust themselves quickly. It will be wise to segment a market area and get more involved by researching its characteristics. Once you have targeted an area and researched it, you can then set goals and begin marketing. It becomes a full-time job. Oh yeah, there it is. I did say it. When you got your license and found yourself not knowing what to do, target marketing can open up the door to real work. It can be a bit involved, but over time, you will find yourself unknowingly becoming well-versed in area characteristics, events, mishaps, and activities. An attractive quality to an agent to have as an agent. So here's the thing. What am I saying here? You know, you talk to an agent that knows when the high school games are, knows when the Christmas parade is, and happens to be in it, right? Knows when the chili cook-off is, knows when the tamale festival is, knows when I'm talking about mishaps here. Oh wow, did you hear about the accident that happened, over there, or did you hear about the fire type of thing? Those are all attractive qualities when you're talking to strangers, and that's because now they've now related you to the area. And this is another reason why your market segment shouldn't be that big, because obviously, if you're well versed, let's say in Santa Monica, but your target market at the time happens to be Cerritos, you may not know some of the things that are going on. It's a less attractive quality, let's put it that way. So once you begin to research and market yourself, you can gauge your progress and see what works. Throw out what doesn't work and increase what does. So if you find something's working, it's something you're getting some feedback and it's working, you just want to do that more often. And find something that's really not working, do it less often. What you don't want to do is just simply stop. You don't want to do something one time and expect it to have results, because that's the opposite of consistency. You have to be consistent. That's the important thing. So anyway, that's it. Any questions or comments? I'm already losing my voice. And yeah, again, sorry, Larry, you were cutting out really bad. So I think you might have a bad connection or something. So speaking of Larry, there's my information. You guys are welcome to call me anytime. We're actually doing really good on time. It's only 7:02. Feel free to call me, email me if you're not getting my emails and or text messages and you would like to. Simply just shoot me an email and I just need your phone number along with your email address and I put you on that list. There's Mr. Larry. His information, phone number, and email address. Mr. Larry, I actually have a question for you, but I'll ask you off the air. But anybody who'd like to talk to Larry, he's a good resource and affiliate for title. So feel free to call him. There's Miss Liz. Yeah, Mr. Larry, what's happening? I can see you now.
I was on, I just walked through the door. So at this point, the suggestion, I love your presentation because it makes sense to go do, but if you go for the probate, fiduciaries, estate planning, know the terminology, because if they ask you a question and you don't know, don't try and fake it, but there are places you can go to study and get caught up on that. That's all I always wanted to say.
Yeah, and I do have a few presentations that cover some of those things, but no, Larry, you're right. These are things that you don't want to walk into the lion's den and find yourself in a position that you can't answer questions right away. It actually has a negative effect.
Yes.
And so yeah, so definitely, if you are going to visit some of the more technical industries that you want to potentially want to target now. I do know agents that will approach those individuals anyway, and that's because they're interested in the information. Okay, that they're the kind of people that learn through hard knocks. And those of you who don't know what that is, it's simply just going through the process, not knowing. And they're going to make mistakes, but they're okay with that. That's the way that they found that they learn. And so this is something that Larry and I probably see eye to eye on in terms of, hey, I wouldn't want to do that because that's not my style. But that doesn't mean that that's not your style. So if it is your style, then okay, then go for it, right? That's your thing. Me personally, I like to read up on things. I like to know a little bit more before I jump into the lion's den and potentially find myself all thumbs, right? So anyway, that said, that was Larry's point, which is a good one. It's a good point. And then there's Miss Liz. Miss Liz is a broker here in the office. She also does loans. You guys ever need an approval or what have you? She does VA, conventional, and FHA. And I don't know if she does mobile homes, but that's probably special kind of financing. But that's her information. And then, as always, I always talk about Mr. Plummer. I do endorse his product. He is a real estate trainer. If you guys are looking for somebody who can pretty much just stay on your back and remind you what you need to be doing on a constant, he does charge for his services, but he does have a free class on Saturdays, which is always motivational and helpful and on different topics. Sometimes you'll see me on there myself, just brushing up on things, but a good place to visit. And then one of our newer resources is Shameen. She's with Property ID, NHD company, one of the supporters of this presentation. Feel free to give her a call if you need anything, but primarily it's just a website, which now that I'm looking at, it's not even up there. Oh yeah, it was propertyd.com, right? So that's where I usually go to order my NHDs, primarily because they carry E&O insurance. And so they do have some new products that are coming out or that have come out, and that's the Max that you see there that she's talking about. And what it does is it allows the client to just open up their email, and all of the NHD information is on the links that they send you. So it's kind of nice. So that is Shameen. So any questions or comments? So actually, that's the end of the show today, guys. Thanks for coming. I do want to do a poll, even though there's only 4 of you. I guess you guys will ultimately be the choosers of next week's presentation. So if you guys wouldn't mind voting, we have these. Well, there's more than these available. I mean, you guys can also suggest something that you might want to see. I'm working on some new stuff, mainly because of the recordings and what have you. So, okay, network marketing and also how to work a file. How to work a file is a bit similar to what we did this past month with the broker file. It's a little different in terms of what I would be talking about on that two-part presentation has more to do with the time frames. You know, what you do next, in other words. Okay, so that's a two-part one, which it looks like that's the winner for today. Thank you guys for voting. So there's the, looks like we got two folks that wanted that one, and it's probably Larry that didn't vote. But for the most part, that's what we'll do next week. Okay, so how to work a file, we'll do the two-part. Hopefully next week we'll get some more folks. I apologize for last week. I actually had some tickets to a soccer game with my daughter's team. Something I couldn't pass up was the Galaxy game against Dallas FC last Wednesday. So I wasn't available to do the class. So I do apologize, but I did notice there was a few people that logged on anyway. So I thank you guys for understanding, because I know some of you look forward to the Wednesday meetings. I know I do. But for the most part, I know some of you guys probably know some people that can benefit from this. So as always, make sure you invite them. You know, it's free. It's just an hour to an hour and a half. And so it's kind of nice to get to know some new folks. Thank you, so I appreciate that. I'll see you guys next week, unless you guys have anything. Anybody want to unmute? Anybody have a question, a comment? How was the presentation today? Your feedback is always welcome. Celia, anything on Elizabeth? All right, well, I have nothing else unless you guys have something. I'm going to go ahead and log off. Unless there's anything else next week, we'll do the how to work a file. Thank you, Mr. Larry. We'll do how to work a file, and we'll get started on that. You're welcome, Celia. I appreciate it. All right, so I'll see you guys next week.